When Captain Jordan Wakefield heard an inexplicable voice, he had no logical reason to listen. All he could think of was, "God, no." But that mysterious warning would lead to one of the most dramatic and inexplicable events in aviation history. As the pilot took off without waiting for the signal, Captain Jordan Wakefield was no stranger to challenges. After all, he had piloted passenger planes through raging storms, mechanical failures, and unexpected turbulence for nearly 12 years. Yet, there was something profoundly unsettling about this day. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The late afternoon sun struggled against dense, rolling clouds overhead. A thick layer of humidity pressed down on Seaborne International Airport, making the air almost suffocating to inhale. In the distance, flickers of lightning illuminated the storm-shrouded horizon. Earlier that afternoon, Flight NA814, a routine domestic route scheduled to carry 150 passengers, had been delayed indefinitely due to severe weather advisories. Hours passed with anxious travelers pacing the terminal, glancing at their watches, and refreshing weather apps in frustration. Ground crews scurried around the apron, scrambling to service planes and recheck safety protocols while ignoring the sweat beading on their brows. By the time Captain Wakefield arrived at the cockpit, the storm system appeared to be dissipating. The official word came in from the meteorological center. Though the skies were far from clear, conditions had improved enough to begin preparing for takeoff. Jordan methodically carried out his pre-flight inspection, scanning the readouts and confirming every last detail. In his seat, co-pilot Hector Moreno verified the engine start procedures, occasionally offering Jordan quiet nods of affirmation. At first, everything appeared to be going as expected for a delayed flight. Yes, tensions were high, but that was nothing unusual when dealing with impatient travelers and lingering storm fronts. Then, in the midst of checking the final instrument readings, Jordan Wakefield heard a voice, clear as day, inside his head. He couldn't tell if it was something that echoed through the cockpit radio or a trick of his anxious mind, but it was there, urgent and impossible to ignore. Initially, Jordan thought he might be imagining things, brought on by exhaustion. He blinked hard, forcing himself to focus on the overhead control panel. Yet, as he reached for a switch, the inexplicable voice echoed again, louder, more urgent. He jolted in his seat, blinking as adrenaline spiked through his veins. His heart hammered, urging him to move, to hurry, to do something he could not fully articulate. Clenching his jaw, Jordan glanced at Hector, trying to gauge if his co-pilot had heard the same voice. But Hector continued with the checklist, calmly announcing altimeter settings, radio frequencies, and flaps configuration. No sign of alarm, no sign that he had heard anything out of the ordinary. Outside, the wind howled around the airplane's fuselage, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. Jordan's gaze drifted over the apron. He saw a ground mechanic stepping away with a thumbs up, signifying the completion of refueling and external checks. Through the cockpit window, Jordan spotted a strange quiver in the control tower's lights, just a faint flicker, as if the entire structure took a short breath. It might have been a trick of the rolling clouds overhead, but it made him uneasy. Something felt wrong. A cold dread washed over Jordan. He didn't understand why fear was pricking at his senses, but he couldn't ignore it. His breath quickened, and a flash of panic played across his features. Suddenly, the voice within him roared with such force that it nearly made him jump out of his seat. Without conscious thought, Jordan slammed a hand against the seat harness, practically dropping his half-finished pre-flight checklist. His mind screamed in protest, torn between rational protocol and this unexplainable sense of urgency. In a moment that would define everything, Jordan leaned forward and practically shouted into the cockpit microphone, "Tower, this is Captain Wakefield of Flight NA814, requesting immediate pushback clearance. Over." Jordan never let him finish. With an intensity that alarmed his co-pilot, he shouted, "God, no! We have to go now!" In that frantic moment, the entire flight deck seemed to hush, as though the plane itself was holding its breath, uncertain whether to obey or question the pilot's abrupt plea. But Jordan was resolute. The voice, the dread, the flickering tower lights, and the suffocating heaviness in the air all collided into one terrifying sense of foreboding. Something catastrophic was about to happen, and he had to get his passengers out of harm's way before it was too late. This wasn't the first time he'd felt compelled to act without even realizing why. Raised in a family of first responders, Jordan was taught early on to trust his instincts. His mother was a paramedic who once saved the life of a teenager despite standard protocol suggesting to wait for a specialized ambulance team. She always told Jordan, "Sometimes your instincts know the truth before your mind can process it." Over the years, Jordan had recognized a pattern. Whenever his sense of urgency flared, it usually proved accurate. He had trusted that feeling to avert more than one dangerous situation. So while this moment felt different, deeper, more visceral, he couldn't bring himself to doubt it. Meanwhile, co-pilot Hector Moreno was a brilliant but by-the-book officer. A graduate of the prestigious Redwood Aviation Academy, Hector was proud of his disciplined approach to checklists and flight procedures. Despite his deep respect for Captain Wakefield, he often challenged Jordan's more intuitive style, believing unwaveringly in thorough cross-checks. The synergy of their opposing methods had worked well, until now. Jordan's urgent request for pushback clearance cut through Addison Morgan's routine like a lightning bolt. Addison, an air traffic controller with a calm, collected demeanor, had been working at Seaborne International's tower for 5 years. She was typically unflappable under pressure and prided herself on her ability to juggle multiple flights with minimal confusion. She had just finished coordinating a takeoff slot for another aircraft on the far runway and was about to confirm a departure sequence with yet another flight when Jordan's abrupt request came through. Addison's eyebrows knitted together. Normally, she would insist on verifying that all pre-flight protocols were followed, especially with volatile weather still in the region. But something in Jordan's tone prompted Addison to glance at the screens in front of her and then at the radar panels. There was nothing obvious that spelled immediate disaster. The storm was clearing. Winds were borderline but manageable. Still, Addison's gut twisted. She pressed the radio button. "Flight NA814. Confirm readiness for immediate pushback." Her voice was professional but tinted with caution. Jordan's response came back firm. "Tower, we are fueling complete. All critical checks are done. I request immediate clearance." The moment Addison confirmed with a shaky "copy," the ground crew set the jet in motion, pushing the plane away from the gate. Passengers strapped in, stowing last-minute luggage and switching off electronics. A hush spread through the cabin as Lily Zhang, lead flight attendant, whispered reassurance to a mother traveling with her fidgety toddler. Zhang was a compassionate, quick-witted flight attendant who had observed Jordan's occasional premonitions firsthand. She knew when to trust his instincts and when to rely on standard procedure. From the cockpit, Jordan peered through the windshield, scanning the runway and the horizon beyond, as if expecting a threat to materialize at any second. Breaking with strict protocol, Addison authorized NA814 to taxi out of the usual sequence. The tower supervisor objected, but she ignored him, focused on ensuring Jordan had a clear runway. In the cockpit, co-pilot Hector hurried through calculations, uneasy about the rushed takeoff. Jordan's urgency was uncharacteristic, but Hector trusted him. As Addison dealt with the tower's hierarchy, Jordan and Hector prepared for departure. Flight attendants strapped in, tension thick in the cabin. As Jordan received final clearance for runway 29, unsettling signs emerged. Addison felt a strange vibration beneath her feet. Lights flickered, radio static crackled, and a sudden gust swept across the tarmac. A baggage cart skidded against the curb. Something was off. Jordan pushed the throttles forward. Just as NA 814 accelerated, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck. The ground convulsed violently. Runway fractures split open. Jordan felt the landing gear dip into a crack. Addison's panicked voice filled the radio. "Earthquake! All flights. Hold position if safe to do so. NA 814, do you copy?" But it was too late to abort. Slamming the brakes would be disastrous. Determined, Jordan pulled back on the control column. The engines roared. The fuselage shook as the plane struggled against the trembling earth. The airport descended into chaos. Windows shattered. Vehicles skidded into walls. Inside the tower, Addison held her ground as the floor buckled, refusing to leave until the plane was safe. NA 814, you're at V1 speed. Rotation is go. Climb to safe altitude, she instructed. Inside the cabin, passengers clung to their seats, fear evident. Flight attendant Lily Jung tried to calm a terrified mother and child. The plane rattled as Jordan fought to maintain control. The final seconds stretched unbearably. Then, the wheels left the ground. The aircraft lifted off, escaping the disintegrating runway. But danger lingered. The quake disrupted local communications. Static garbled Addison's instructions. Jordan called in, "Seaborne Tower, NA 814. We're airborne. Request updated headings. Over." Only static replied. Then Addison's voice broke through in fragments. "Tower, power, structural, proceed, altitude, higher." The message dissolved. Hector's face paled. "Captain, we need altitude fast. Instruments are unstable in this storm. We'll climb above 10,000 feet and try reaching another tower." Below, Addison faced catastrophe. Seaborne International was near the epicenter. The tower's supervisor demanded evacuation, but Addison refused to leave without confirming NA 814's safety. Her heart pounded as she saw the plane break through the storm. For a moment, relief washed over her. Then, a thunderous crack split through the control tower's foundation.